Hi, I'm Gabriella Levine, Ulrich Museum's Mary Joan Wade Education Intern during the 2021-2022 academic year. I'm standing here in the exhibition Myths of the West in front of A Wild West, a series of 6 prints created in 1969 by artist Warrington Colescott. Warrington Colescott was born to Creole parents in Oakland, California in 1921 and educated at the University of California, Berkeley. Although less well known than his brother, the artist Robert Colescott, Warrington is remembered as an innovative printmaker and influential teacher. His most renowned works are satirical representations of social issues related to American history and politics that intermingle the absurd and the tragic. We can see that in the jarring contrast between humor and seriousness in A Wild West. Through these contrasts, Colescott was asking his audience in the late 1960s, at the dawn of the civil rights activism spearheaded by the American Indian movement, to consider the ways in which American culture represents and remembers the era of westward colonization. The first 3 works you see in this grouping foreground the violence of the relationship between arriving colonizers and Native Americans. Such violence began in the 17th century and intensified in the 19th century. Cowboys and Indians shows each of the titular groups chasing each other in a vicious cycle of violent attacks and reprisals. Through his title, Colescott reminds us that this history has been trivialized in popular memory as a game played by boys pretending to be men. At the same time, Colescott's imagery is horrific and also insists that the worst suffering was borne by women on both sides of the conflict. Wagon Train evokes the familiar narratives based on both real experiences and media representations about the arduous journey west undertaken by settlers. The families who went west lived for months in covered wagons amid harsh conditions and risked dying before reaching a new home. Settlers often traveled in groups known as wagon trains, and Colescott depicts one such train protecting itself from attack by circling the wagons. Yet the dangers the settlers are firing at are absurd and clearly imagined. Behind Colescott's caricature lies the historical reality that while Native American attacks on wagon trains did occur, they were rare. Settlers were much more likely to die of disease and starvation on their journeys. Meanwhile, sensationalized accounts of Native violence against white settlers dehumanized Native Americans and were used to justify the use of military force and unjust federal policies that created a profoundly desperate situation by the late 19th century. Custer's Last Stand depicts the Battle of Little Bighorn, which occurred on June 25, 1876 in present-day Montana. This was a military encounter between U.S. Army regiments led by Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer and the Cheyenne, Arapaho, and Lakota tribes led by Lakota warrior Crazy Horse. The Native warriors defeated the U.S. soldiers, and Custer died in battle along with 260 of his men. The success was a short-lived one for the Native tribes, however, since this defeat galvanized the U.S. Army, which forced the Sioux and Cheyenne onto reservations soon after. The top of the print depicts Mount Rushmore, located in the Black Hills of present-day South Dakota. Conflict over the Black Hills, which spanned South Dakota and Wyoming, was the reason for the Battle of Little Bighorn. The Black Hills are sacred to the Cheyenne and the Lakota, and the U.S. government promised this land to them until gold was discovered in 1875. The creation of the Mount Rushmore Monument in the Black Hills in the 20th century was yet another affront to Native people, for whom the mountain is sacred. The juxtaposition of the battle and of Mount Rushmore represents the continued history of U.S. encroachment in this region. Even though Colescott clearly ridicules Custer, referring to him as Custard, the looming Mount Rushmore serves as a reminder of Native losses. Today, this image acquires additional poignancy in light of the ongoing conflict over land and water use at the Standing Rock Reservation, which is also located in South Dakota. The next 3 works depict images representing the stories and stereotypes associated with settler life in the West. High Noon for Hoot Gibson speaks to the powerful role which movie westerns have played in constructing our ideas about the West. Edmund Richard Gibson, known by the nickname Hoot, was one of the most successful stars in the burgeoning genre of Western movies between the 1920s and 1940s. He acted in over 100 films which helped construct familiar cinematic tropes about the American West, especially the heroic, solitary cowboy who uses his guns to fight for justice. High noon refers to the time of day when, according to lore, cowboys prefer to have gun standoffs. In this print, the cowboy's many arms exaggerate and mock the idea of a cinematic hero who can effortlessly dispatch a dozen enemies on his own. The 2 figures lying at the bottom of the print also make us question the depiction of women as passive and subjugated objects of the cowboy's sexual interests. The print titled Dodge City further examines the stereotypes of Western life, with gambling and prostitution depicted as the dominant activities that we associate with the Old West. Between 1872 and 1886, Dodge City, Kansas was a booming railhead town to which cowboys drove herds of cattle and traders brought supplies of goods to be transported throughout the West. There were other towns like this at the time, but Dodge City developed an overblown reputation for violence and vice thanks to sensationalized press accounts that later migrated into other media, notably the TV show Gunsmoke. Colescott's prints depict a motley group of gamblers in a saloon. The body of a large nude woman, presumably a prostitute, dominates the composition. Her presence reflects the major role that women who engaged in sex work play in our imagining of the West. Her larger-than-life scale also perhaps urges us to reconsider those whom she represents as more complex figures than either amoral femme fatales or mere victims. The mainly single young women who worked as prostitutes in the West were as much pioneers as any other group of frontier settlers, and historians have shown that prostitution, while technically outlawed, was widely tolerated because it was an important source of revenue for places like Dodge City in their early years. The last work in this series, Home on the Range, derives its title from the song of the same name. Home on the Range is both the official song of the state of Kansas and is also widely considered the anthem of the American West. Its earliest version dates to 1873, although multiple versions of the song's lyrics exist. All of them praise the range as a place full of beauty, purity, and peaceful coexistence of man with nature. Colescott's print is a satire of this bucolic vision. A bear threatens the humans depicted while two of the men appear to be bumbling livestock thieves. Perhaps most strikingly, Colescott's print shifts attention away from the diverse fauna of the range to the human diversity that historically has been overlooked. Although he depicts them as caricatures, Colescott shows both African Americans and Asian Americans as active participants in Western life, and seems to insist that the history of the West should be depicted as messy rather than picturesque.